You're listening to Southeast Radio's Business Matters with Karl Fitzpatrick in association with Wexford Insurances. Challenge us at Wexford Insurances 0818 31 30 30.
I'm joined now by Phil Walker from Econcertive. Good morning, Phil. Start by telling me a bit about your own background, please.
I'm an engineer originally from the shipbuilding industry back in the UK in the 1980s. I worked in kind of production related roles, then I was quality assurance manager of the largest merchant shipyard in the UK. I got involved then with standards and ISO 9000 certification. I then went to China and Korea for 5 years, working for a certification company where I did quality certifications and then environmental certification work. I then ran a hotel for a while. Don't ask me why, but we did. It seemed a good idea at the time. And I moved to Ireland with my wife, who's Irish, about 8 years ago.
So when you moved to Ireland, what did you do career-wise then?
I was starting with a clean slate. So I originally got some kind of part-time and short-term work, and I worked then for Waterford Chamber as their environmental representative, helping small businesses mainly save money on energy, waste and water.
And where did the idea for Econcertive come from?
It really comes from my original background in certification. There's a standard called ISO 14001, which is the international environmental certification. It's a very good standard, but it's great for large companies. For small companies, it's like a sledgehammer to crack a nut. So I just felt at the time that there was a need for something much simpler, much cheaper and much easier for small companies to use that will do the same job for them. And really that's what Econcertive and Ecocert is about. It's about helping small businesses save money on energy, waste and water.
So tell me the steps you took to set Econcertive up.
Originally, when I came up with the idea, I approached the EPA with it because I had done work with them previously through Waterford Chamber. I knew they were kind of interested in helping small businesses, so I came with the idea to them. They liked it. We then partnered up with some local authorities and started a little pilot programme with it, which went very well. And really it built from there. So we proved it with the pilot exercise. We now have around 50 certified companies at this stage of all sizes, and really it's built from there. Yeah.
And your product, Ecocert, how does that work?
Again, it's a very simple idea. Everything is about simplicity. Really what happens is it's mostly for small companies. It was designed for small companies, although we actually do have some quite large clients now as well, because they're more interested in value for money than perhaps they were a few years ago. But broadly, the process is the same. I come into the company, I start by looking at the company's bills on energy, waste and water, see what they're spending, and then spend time walking around the site with the owner or the manager to see where it's being spent. And the whole idea there is to find opportunities for savings. And also, because they're environment related, a cost saving also equates to environmental improvement. So what's happening is you're becoming greener and saving money at the same time. And the bonus is you then get a certification at the end of it so that you can demonstrate the improvements you've made, and that can be useful for your customers and for the public at large.
So you mentioned there that you look at waste, energy and water. Give me some examples.
Every company is different, of course, and every time you go into a company you try to go in with a completely open set of eyes, and it's really quite surprising what you can find at times. Even in some quite small companies you can make some quite large savings. A good example is fairly recently. They were using electric kilns and their electricity bill was about €10,000 a year. And we were looking at ways of maybe reducing that, because that was a big cost for a small company, which was basically employ 2 people. So we looked closely at it, and what I found was that the reason for their bills being so high was a thing called the MIC, which is maximum input capacity. And that's really the biggest amount of electricity you draw at any given time. And there was really once a year, they had a very busy period where they drew a lot of electricity during the day, which whacked up their bills. Most of the time they were doing most of their processing overnight and getting cheap rate. But just once a year, when you actually look through the records, they were spending this extra electricity during the day, which bumped up their bills across the whole year, just for that very short busy period. So what we did was we just did a bit of rescheduling, changed the way they ran their production at these busy times, and we saved them 30% off their bill, $3,000 a year.
That's a good example on the electricity side. Can you give me an example similar to that on the waste side?
Yep, waste is, again, you'll find this kind of thing recently. I worked with a company very recently. This is fairly typical. This was quite a large site, a manufacturing site. They were not segregating waste. In fact, they were using skips rather than bins. And one of the problems with skips is everything gets thrown into a skip, whereas if you've got a bin, it kind of encourages you to segregate. So even though you're trying to segregate, if you've got a skip on site, everything gets thrown into it. Even worse, they were paying by weight, which you always do with skips. It was an open skip, so every time it rained, which it's done quite a lot recently, they were adding the weight of all the rainwater to what they were paying for their landfill costs. So, I mean, there's a huge amount of money being wasted there, and it's sorted out just by segregating more carefully, changing from skip to bins, and there'd be about a 50% saving for that company. We're just going through that process with them now. We're quite confident at least 50% they're going to save, just by being a little bit more mindful and a little bit more careful about how they dispose of the rubbish.
Water, have you a similar example in relation to that?
Yes, water is becoming more important now because it's becoming more expensive. And a lot of companies, because water costs have increased so much recently, a lot of companies still aren't really aware how much it's costing them until they really look. Surprisingly often, even in fairly modern premises, we'll find there's a water leak. I worked in a transport company recently, a bus company, and on their site they had several water leaks, and that was costing them about €7,000 a year. This is water that's just going straight onto their site and straight out again. And because it was on their side of the meter, they were paying for it. They didn't know what was happening until we actually looked, saw how much water they were using, and could see that they were using far too much for what they seemed to be doing. And as again, just you can do a very, very simple check, find out for yourself very quickly that there's an issue here. And in their case, as I say, about €7,000 a year just in water leaks.
Tell me about your involvement with Wexford County Enterprise Board.
The Enterprise Board, they actually started off as a client of mine. We did exactly the same thing with them. We went in to look at their energy waste and water, identify some savings for them and so on. And I've been working with them directly and indirectly for the last year or so. I'm now actually a mentor, an environmental mentor on their mentoring scheme, which means that small businesses in the county can use me to help them with their energy waste and water costs and savings. And do that through the offices of the Enterprise Board.
I know that the government have adopted a green procurement model in recent times. Tell our listeners a little bit about that, please, Phil.
That was earlier on this year. A new government policy was announced where they're looking to make sure that government money, and that includes local authorities, government departments and so on, public money, is being spent responsibly from an environmental point of view as well as from a cost-effectiveness point of view. So these local authorities and government departments and so on are now required to look at where they're spending their money from an environmental performance point of view. So that means that if businesses are selling to the public sector at all, then it will become more important for them in the very near future to be able to show that they are acting in an environmentally responsible way as well as providing value for money.
And what are the options to companies to be able to provide evidence of that?
One of the best and easiest ways is to have an environmental certification of some sort. Again, this could be ISO 14001, which was the international standard I mentioned earlier. There's various schemes that are available. Another two Irish schemes that are mentioned actually in the procurement policy are the Green Hospitality Scheme, which is for hotels and restaurants and so on. And I'm glad to say Econcertive. So,
Phil, what you're saying is that companies that will be able to demonstrate a green edge in the future will have a higher chance of winning tenders?
Yes, I would certainly say so. I mean, that is very clear, definite government policy. So I think in the future, if a public body is looking at spending money or tendering for a contract and they get in two very similar quotes, but one from a company who has demonstrated green credentials and one who doesn't, then I would expect that the one with the green credentials would have a much better chance of winning that contract.
Phil, you mentioned earlier in the interview that you approached the EPA when setting the business up first day. Tell me, how supportive were they to you?
The EPA support has been absolutely crucial. They helped provide funding initially through the pilot scheme and through the first couple of years of operation, that without that, I wouldn't have got off the ground with it. The other thing is, through the Ecocert certification, they're obviously very happy with the way it's been set up. In fact, their logo appears on each and every Ecocert certificate. So that kind of gives an idea of the level of importance of the EPA support is to Ecocert.
You stated that you have over 50 companies certified at this stage. What sectors do they range from and to?
Really, they're in all sectors and all sizes. Originally, the scheme was set up with the idea of it being for small businesses, but that gradually changing as well. I have some fairly sizable businesses now we're working with. I mean, the biggest site we've certified to date is a manufacturing plant with 110 people. The smallest company is, in fact, my website designer who works from home. And so there's the whole cross-section in between of size of company. One thing we have found that is emerging recently is we're getting particular interest from the manufacturing sector and also now transport industry as well.
And where do you think that demand has been driven from?
It's down to costs. Both manufacturing and transport are being pressured very hard in terms of their unit costs, and they are most definitely sectors who are having to look very hard for savings.
Well, Phil, I'd like to take this opportunity to thank you for dropping by, and I'd like to wish you continued success in business.
You're listening to Southeast Radio's Business Matters with Karl Fitzpatrick in association with Wexford Insurances. Think Wexford Insurances for your business insurance.